Hi, I'm Ben Mankiewicz with Turner Classic Movies. On behalf of TCM, Fathom Events, and Columbia Pictures, welcome to the TCM Big Screen Classic Series. This month's feature is a tribute to the wholesome, aspirational nature of American politics, made up entirely of dedicated public servants who inspire us to be our best selves. I'm just kidding. This is a savage appraisal of American politics, nearly 8 decades old, but somehow just as fresh as yesterday's feed on C-SPAN 2. Mostly, though, this is Jimmy Stewart giving what many consider his finest performance. From director Frank Capra in 1939, with a screenplay by Sidney Buckman based on Louis R. Foster's original story, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. The picture is the defining film in Capra's quintet of movies celebrating American idealism, a list that also includes Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, released 3 years earlier in 1936, Meet John Doe from 1941, It's a Wonderful Life from 46, and State of the Union from 1948. Furthermore, Capra directed most of the movies in the Why We Fight documentary series, commissioned by the government during World War II to deliver an inspirational justification for the war to the American people. In his feature films, Capra often celebrated American democracy by putting it in conflict with the realities of human nature that threaten it. In Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Capra takes on corruption at the seat of government. Jimmy Stewart plays the title role, an earnest yet naive young man appointed to the U.S. Senate. He soon finds out he was chosen only because political power brokers in his home state, never identified, expect him to do as he's told and for their benefit. Ultimately, Senator Smith faces a universal challenge and a frequent dilemma in those Capra pictures, standing on principle despite the allure of fame, power, and money. Jean Arthur, who starred in 3 Capra classics, plays opposite Stewart as his cynical assistant. She thinks he's too good to be true until she sees his sincerity in action. Arthur and Stewart had worked together on another Capra movie, a memorable comedy, You Can't Take It With You, released the year before in 1938. And their chemistry in that film convinced Capra they'd be perfect in Mr. Smith. Capra and Stewart worked together only once more in It's a Wonderful Life. In 1939, Capra was Hollywood's most successful director, the biggest name on the other side of the camera, and he didn't get there by taking a hands-off approach. Capra micromanaged every aspect of the production, even reproducing the Senate chamber down to the last detail. The end product is classic Capra, funny, powerful, poignant, packed with emotion, and ultimately a celebration of what's truly great about the idea of America, though many senators and journalists at the time had a less than enthused reaction. More about that after the movie. From 1939, also with Claude Rains and Thomas Mitchell, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Welcome back, everybody. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington earned 11 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture, but it suffered from a serious case of 1939-itis, a common condition for movies released in what is widely considered Hollywood's finest year. Here are the other 9 nominees for Best Picture from '39. Gone with the Wind, The Wizard of Oz, Ninotchka, Dark Victory, Of Mice and Men, Stagecoach, Wuthering Heights, Goodbye, Mr. Chips, Love Affair. Of those 11 nominations, others went to Jimmy Stewart for Best Actor, Frank Capra for Best Director, Sidney Buckman for Best Screenplay. It won just a single Oscar to Louis R. Foster for Best Original Story. Though Mr. Smith Goes to Washington was successful, a powerful contingent lobbied against it. Just before its release, the D.C. Press Club hosted a gala preview with politicians and reporters in attendance. According to director Frank Capra's biography, several people shouted at the screen and walked out angry at the portrayals of politicians as crooks and reporters as drunks, complicit in the corruption. Some attacked the film as anti-American. Alvin Barkley, a Democratic senator from Kentucky, the majority leader, was particularly harsh, calling the movie, quote, a grotesque distortion of the Senate that makes senators look like a bunch of crooks. Imagine the vice president, steamed Barkley, winking at a pretty girl in the gallery to encourage a filibuster. Barkley would later get a chance to prove that scene wrong when he became Harry Truman's vice president in 1949. The U.S. ambassador to Great Britain, Joe Kennedy, the father, of course, of a future president, sent an angry telegram to Will Hayes, the head of the Production Code Office. I have just seen Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, wrote Kennedy, and I consider this one of the most disgraceful things I have ever seen done to our country. Despite the harsh rhetoric, Columbia studio boss Harry Cohn believed in the picture and released it. And 79 years later, it's impossible not to be inspired by Stewart's passionate speech in the climactic filibuster scenes. Incidentally, Stewart sounded hoarse in the speech, as if he'd been talking for 23 hours, by using dichloride of mercury to cause his vocal cords to swell. Coming up next month in the TCM Big Screen Classic Series, we're celebrating the 30th anniversary of Die Hard. Shoot the glass. To find out more, go to fathomevents.com. For Turner Classic Movies, Fathom Events, and Columbia Pictures, I'm Ben Mankiewicz. Thanks for coming out to the show.